Hey, I'm Jess Willie. I'm a TV and media critic who occasionally branches out to other stuff. I've got some pretty cool friends. A little strange, maybe, but cool. There's Nick, an AI copy of a buddy of mine from college that I installed on my smart TV. He's supposed to keep the show on track, but he spends more time watching Brazilian cooking shows. There's King Ralph Detritus, an old toy from my childhood who is somehow alive, and he rules a massive underground kingdom from a stronghold in my basement. There's Zylogaphia P. Robinson. She's a magical winter elf who started out as an observer from the International Internet Reviewers Guild, but she sorta went native. So if you want to know the story, go and watch the back catalog. If you're just interested in a review of the thing you clicked on, sit back, relax, and don't ask questions. Or if you have questions, leave them in the comments. Maybe I'll answer. The only question you can be sure I'm gonna answer is, did I get what I paid for? Is it just me, or have we watched a lot of really good things this season?
And that's a problem?
Yes and no. Yes, because half the audience only tunes in to watch us suffer. No, because I don't like subjecting myself to bad shows and movies.
You know something no one's ever said anything good about? Baltimore.
Some of the best years of my life were when I was living outside of Balmer.
You're weird. Name one good thing to come out of Charm City.
The best damn crab cake sandwich I've ever had.
Fine. Name something that isn't food.
Um, Character actor John Aston?
Ugh.
Sorry we were late, but we were.
They don't need to know.
Oh, right. So, are you ready to get started on your review of Homicide Life on the Street? No, I haven't even started the history segment yet.
No fumbling with the history segments. Ooh, I self-censored.
Sorry, this one is mandatory. I have to justify why this one is based on a book. And, oh man, is it a doozy of a story.
Ugh. Fine.
I have a confession. I don't mind the history segments. At least when they're actually interesting. In 1989 and 1990, Baltimore Sun crime reporter David Simon got the rare opportunity to become embedded in the Baltimore City Police Department, much the way media correspondents are with the military during wartime. The experience is thought to be comparable since he did so in the midst of one of the most turbulent, lengthy, and notorious crime waves in the city's history. In the year or so he was there, the city experienced approximately 237 murders. After his internship ended, Simon wrote his 1991 book, Homicide: A Year on the Killing Streets. Somehow or other, this book wound up in the hands of screenwriter Paul Attanasio and producer-director Barry Levinson. They got it into their heads that this would make a great TV show. That might not seem so strange in the modern era of prestige streaming dramas, or even 10 years after the show was produced during the golden age of cable TV. But this was 1993, and it aired on NBC of all places. You know, the same network that gave you Friends? The series faced problems from the beginning. Barry Levinson, being Baltimore born and raised, fought to keep the native feel of the book. He insisted they shoot in the city and use local actors for supporting roles whenever possible. Levinson won the argument, but it was a move that proved unpopular not only with the suits at NBC but most of the main cast. This meant the first season was effectively a miniseries. They had no intention of doing any more episodes after that. The problem was the series did just well enough to score a 4-episode renewal the following year, and a full season order for the next 5 years after that. But we're not going to talk about those right now. We're just going to cover the first 2 miniseries.
Wait, a show that started as a miniseries but turned into a regular gig? That's like the same thing we did.
No comment. There's one more bit of TV trivia we have to talk about when discussing Homicide: Life on the Street. It's the birthplace of John Munch, played by the late Richard Belzer. It's a character he would go on to play on 10 other TV series, most notably the first 15 seasons of Law & Order Special Victims Unit. He'd also appear on the original Law & Order, the short-lived Law & Order Trial by Jury, The Beat, The X-Files, Arrested Development, The Wire, American Dad, 30 Rock, The Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt, and a comedy sketch on Jimmy Kimmel Live. Plus, he got a name shout-out on the BBC's Luthor and on Brooklyn Nine-Nine.
All right, that's enough of that.
Our story begins with Detective Too Cool for School and the brother Seamus out looking for something. They're babbling on and on about existential nonsense and its place in crime solving while trading insults. Eventually, they find what they're looking for: the crime scene. They get a preliminary report on what's going on, but go back to their conversation about the pointlessness of life and how the only thing more pointless is death. Because, priorities. It's now the next morning in the squad room. Enter Tim Bayless. He's the rookie detective in the unit, so you can tell he's going to be our point of view character for the first few seasons of the show. He's looking for Lieutenant Giardello. It's an Italian last name, so he obviously assumes it's John Polito. Because there's no way that the head of the homicide unit in a majority black city would be, gasp, a black man.
This show is about Baltimore in the early 90s, so historically speaking...
Yeah, whatever. G gives him a tour of the unit. He shows him the interrogation room and the caseload board. He says if a case is in red, it's open. That's bad. If it turns to black, then it's closed. That's good. Simple, right? And it is. The rookie is happy to be there, where all the excitement happens. Sort of like if Julian Bashir decided to become a homicide detective instead of a doctor. We cut to Munchin, Sam from Captain America 1990, following up on a stabbing. Munch practices his stand-up comedy routine about Hulk Hogan on the guy, and it works wonders. He tells them most of what he knows just to get Munch to shut up. Too bad his story is complete bullshit. Cressetti and Lewis aren't even having that much luck on their case. So they're just sitting around, chewing the fat, talking about what keeps them up at night. Now with me, it's why does Barney Rubble spend all that money on elaborate costumes in order to steal Fred's cereal when he could just buy it? You'd think with homicide detectives it would be grisly murders. In Cressetti's case, it sorta is. He's a conspiracy nut. He thinks that Booth might not have killed Lincoln, and Ford's theater was an inside job.
It was. Booth was working at the theater at the time.
Detectives Felton and Howard are sitting around arguing about who should answer the phone. After all, whoever picks it up is the primary investigator. They both have a lot of red up on the board. On the one hand, it could be a slam dunk. They'd be back in time for lunch with slightly higher monthly stats. On the other hand, it could be a nigh unsolvable disaster, and they'd become a laughingstock. So they flip for it. Poor Howard. It's a case where somebody found a body in a building that has been rather stinky for a while. The place is owned by a notorious slumlord who has a dozen side hustles. He's a bill collector for the phone company. He owns a car wash and a used car dealership. Plus, he refurbishes old furniture. So, of course, instead of getting useful information from the woman who found the body, they wind up discussing the minutiae of various types of couches. Lots of hug and bear taunts Munch for not solving a case. Bayless wants coffee, so Munch engages in a little bit of friendly hazing. Bollander continues mocking Munch. Munch says the medical examiner ruled it an accidental death, not a homicide. We don't have to do shit. Bollander says, I don't care. The ME could say that Jenny Good is alive and well and living in Hoboken, but we both know it was a murder.
I don't think anyone living in Hoboken is happy.
Munch goes to interrogate the guy from the case he's supposed to be working on. You know, his job. The guy from before is writing out a confession, but once again, Munch realizes it's total crap. So the guy tears it up and starts again.
Sort of like you did with this script.
Hey! At the bar, the gang are bad-mouthing the still unseen Detective Frank Templeton, mostly because, despite department policy, he refuses to work with a partner. The weird thing about their complaints is none of them want to partner with the man because he's an asshole. Giardello says, apart from me, Howard is our most experienced detective. I think she should work with Bayless. Felton, from now on, you work with Templeton. So, Felton gets up from the table without paying and walks away. I mean, what's the manager gonna do? Call the cops? Since they have a few moments between the end of that scene and the commercial break, Otis shows Munch a few photos from the case file of his not murder just to annoy him and have it weigh on his conscience. After NBC finishes selling us Coca-Cola and mac and cheese, we finally meet Captain Raymond Holt. Detective Frank Templeton. Sorry, easy mistake to make. Giardello tells him, you're getting a partner. Templeton says, no. I do not solve cases that fast by having to explain things to idiots. This arrangement we have, it's better for me, and it's better for you. Giardello says, no. That arrangement gets me in trouble with the brass on a weekly basis. You're working with Felton, okay? Felton is thinking, Howard, I could work with her. Lewis would do in a pinch, but Felton, no. I despise the man.
And he should. I mean, he is Daniel Baldwin.
Shouldn't he request to be transferred off the case?
Too late. They're supposed to go investigate a body that was found at a hotel, but their first case turns out to be, where did Frank leave his squad car? Felton says we are not searching this entire lot until we find it. Templeton says, oh yes we are. If you thought Felton was an asshole at lunch, well,
Today's Felton tells yesterday's Felton to hold his beer. He stays to aid the investigation out of pure spite. Munch and Bolander are driving around looking for a bar with a German name where a guy with long blonde hair hangs out. They keep talking about stuff related to the case, one that, need I remind you, they don't have jurisdiction to investigate. We cut back to Felton and Templeton. They're bickering and arguing like an old married couple or two cops who have been partners for way too long. They haven't even gone over half the lot yet. At least their argument is for good old American cop show reasons. Felton thinks Templeton is full of himself simply because he puts in the time to solve cases. Templeton thinks Felton is kind of racist. Templeton's about to break for lunch. Felton says, "Hey, isn't there a body rotting at a hotel somewhere or something?" The woman from the opening case tells Louis and Cressetti all that she knows. She could have avoided this whole situation for $5,000. That's all the guy who stabbed her wanted. She could have gotten the money the same way she had before, being the victim of a crime. Over the years, she'd been assaulted, stabbed, and even shot. Not only had she collected money from a victim's compensation fund, but her aunt got some insurance payouts. Louis and Cressetti think, no way that's suspicious. Hey, has your family suffered any other tragedies? She says my aunt has been married 4 or 5 times and each of her husbands has died under mysterious circumstances. Does that count? Howard, Felton, and Bayless are sitting around talking while Frank continues to look for the car. Hey, it's a pretty good excuse to give more of Bayless's backstory. He was part of the mayor's personal guard. He got a minor line of duty injury. As a reward, he was given his pick of assignments. Instead of choosing a department where you were guaranteed to get raises and promotions every couple of years and overtime was optional, he chose homicide instead, because that makes sense. They finish the story right as Frank finds the car. Templeton says, "Felton, what are you doing here? I thought your shift was about to end." Felton says, "It is, but we're taking Proby here to see his first corpse." I bet along the way, Felton tells them the tale of Lars Hogan. Cressetti and Louis have gotten a warrant to exhume one of the aunt's husband's bodies. They're talking to the gravedigger who takes them to the site where he's supposed to be buried. But alas, poor Yorick, they stuffed your body in a styrofoam cooler and forgot about you. Munch and Bolander are investigating their non-case, but the parents don't seem to know anything. I mean, they really don't know anything. They've been spreading the confidential information the police gave them all over town. Which means, even if it was a murder, the guy knows to, I don't know, cut his hair and ditch the car. Meanwhile, at little Timmy Bayless's first crime scene, Templeton gives an explanation for what he thinks happened. To his surprise, Bayless agrees with most of Frank's thoughts, but points out a few minor flaws in the theory. At first, Templeton finds this annoying. Howard and Felton say, yeah, maybe you should come with us to canvass witnesses and let Frank do his thing. Most of the people they talk to are completely useless, apart from providing work for a few Baltimore area character actors. But one guy says that he saw the victim enter the hotel room the night before with a teenage boy.
The one time they could use an SVU detective.
Back at the MD's office, Louis and Cressetti are dealing with an issue. They got the right casket from the right burial plot, but it's not the right body.
Either the gravedigger is incompetent or they got their corpses off of Timo.
Apparently the cemetery has had a few microscopic little itsy bitsy glitches in the paperwork on almost every body they've buried in the last 5 years. Back at the precinct, G wants to know where Bayless is and why Howard and Felton are still working together. Howard says, because Templeton said our names would be up on the board if we took Bayless with us. They're about to fight over it. When Sleazy McSleazerton from the basement murder shows up for questioning, they get him in the box. He starts acting more nervous than a Mormon on a first date at Starbucks. We don't know what was said, but the name goes from red to black. At the bar, Munch is fed up with this non-case. He confesses to it himself just to get it closed. Bolander tells him to shut up. Since scanned photos weren't a thing in the early 90s, Munch spends the entire night in the file room looking over photos from recent DUI arrests. He doesn't find any photos of men with long curly blonde hair, but he does find one of a guy with long curly hair and the worst dye job this side of Tommy Wiseau. This leads them to a guy who looks like he just stepped off the set of an anti-drug PSA for WBAL TV. Case closed. Bolander goes to the medical examiner's office to talk to the new chief. He's intent on tearing them a new one. He takes one look at her, and it's only the risk of a copyright claim that prevents me from inserting Thomas Dolby's "She Blinded Me with Science." Over yet another meal, Howard is reading an HR complaint letter that Grassetti wrote to G about how Lewis has been treating him. The gang laugh it up, but Grassetti swears revenge. Bayless asks Templeton if they can go find the team from the hotel. Templeton says the uniformed officers are on it, no worries. Yeah, Templeton is clearly trying to write Bayless off, but the guy is too stubborn. Instead, we get a Jedi training montage. They catch the kid. Bayless asks, Frank, can I see you do your magic in the box? Templeton says, well, I usually sell tickets, but just this once. For his first trick, he gets the guy to sign away his constitutional rights. Then he gets the guy to admit that the old man had a seizure. For his grand finale, Frank says, aha! We already know the victim was strangled. Back in the squad room, Bayless is having second thoughts. On the one hand, he is 100% convinced Frank is right. On the other hand, they're still waiting on the medical examiner to confirm it. Hamilton says, have you ever heard of reasonable deception? It's how we do our job. Any cop who tells you otherwise is lying or trying to sell you something. Bayless says, that's kinda messed up. Frank says, you want to know what else is messed up? What that guy did should land him 20 years in prison. But he'll either take a plea or argue about what we did in court and have it reduced to 15. Then, thanks to prison overcrowding and our parole system, be back out on the street in 5. Bayless says, but you have to believe in rehabilitation. Otherwise, what's the point, right? Right? Outside, Munch, Lewis, and Grassetti are engaging in that age-old hobby of police detectives everywhere, pontificating on the pointlessness of solving murders, especially in a city like Baltimore where for every one you solve, 2 more are committed. Then Bayless makes a decision that will haunt him for 7 seasons and a movie. He answers the phone, thus creating his first case as a primary investigator. And that's it. That's the episode. Okay, years ago I wrote but never shot a video essay called The 5 Laws of Television. The first law was that if a show ran for 6 seasons or less, the pilot was generally the worst of the run. Most of that comes from the fact that they're still shaking the bugs out of it. Yes, I know, Homicide: Life on the Street lasted for 7 seasons, but the first 2 were barely the length of one for the time, so I think that rule could still be applied. If the series didn't break the rule, if this is one of the worst stories the series has to offer, then it's pretty solid. I think there are 2, maybe 3 episodes in the first 2 seasons that are worse than this.
This isn't the bad one. This is the meh episode.
I think it was the philosopher Leonard Briscoe who said if something does not make sense, it belongs in Baltimore. You want to talk about not making sense? You don't often see Emmy nominations, let alone wins, for a pilot. One of the few shows to pull off this feat was Homicide: Life on the Street. What separates Life on the Street from almost every other cop show of the time is that the police are not always the good guys. Yes, they are shown to be dedicated to their jobs and how harrowing that occupation can be, especially in the age before the use of DNA evidence was widespread. Plus, it doesn't sugarcoat when the police do what is objectively the wrong thing. Unlike shows like Law and Order, that try to have their cake and eat it too. Bad cops exist, but our guys are a good bunch. Unless the actor's leaving on bad terms with the producers, and then they'll totally make them a bad guy. Nope. On Life on the Street, bad cops exist, and some of them are in our unit. Good cops exist, but sometimes make really bad choices.
I want french fries, I want french fries, I want french fries. I would need money to get you that gizmo. Go get money, go get money, go get money. If you'd like to see Gizmo eat french fries in our upcoming reviews of Star Trek Enterprise, go to patreon.com/parodyerrorfilms and become a patron today. Click and subscribe, click and subscribe, click and subscribe. I think you mean like and subscribe. That too, that too, that too.